Hello, welcome to Learn Knitting Now. I'm Callista, and you have found Magic Loop Choose Your Own Adventure Socks class. We will be loosely following Socks by the Numbers pattern by Alison Griffiths. The main difference is in her pattern recipe. She uses double pointed needles and a lot of photos to show you exactly how to knit socks. We will be using Magic Loop with a long cable needles. So that's kind of the main difference. But the cool thing about this pattern, I keep calling it a pattern / recipe because it doesn't tell you exactly cast on this many stitches, knit this many inches on your sock. It goes off of a number that we will find together that helps you, that takes into account your gauge and your foot size. So, and then we will do some calculations off of that to make our pattern. And that might sound a little bit complicated. It really is not. We'll do it together. I will have several examples. And the thing that it allows us to do that I really like is use whatever yarn you want and then the corresponding needles to that size. So if you're wanting to use a sock yarn or fingering, it's also called fingering sometimes, but a sock yarn that's real thin that will create a sock that will fit in a shoe, you can do that. You can also use a worsted weight, which is what I'm going to use to have kind of more of a slipper feel. But either way, we're going to do a very uncomplicated, not fancy sock. You might see in the knitting world, they're called vanilla socks. That just means nothing fancy. So there's no color work, no cables, nothing like that. And I think that's a really good way to learn the basic construction of a sock. This is a very standard way people make socks. There are some other more fancy ways. I may get into those in other classes, but for our purposes here, we are going to be doing a heel flap and gusset sock is what it's called. And we'll get into later more exactly what that means. But for now, we just need to go over our supplies and some considerations when you are looking for supplies. The first and most important is yarn, not unsurprisingly. If you're looking for a thinner sock, then you'll use a yarn that is labeled fingering sock. It might also have a category 1 marking on it, or fine. So that's going to be the more thin. This is an example of a sock that I made with fingering yarn. And it also shows us a good example of a consideration regarding color. If you have this is a self-striping sock yarn. If you have a self-striping sock yarn, then you need to know that you see how this pattern in the colors is different than up here. This will happen. Probably, most likely. And there really isn't a way to avoid that with this type of construction in a sock. So if this is going to bother you, I'm going to recommend a solid color or a speckled. Sometimes the independent dyers will call their colors speckled so that it's not striping like this, or a tonal, which is just kind of varying degrees of shades with the same color, so it's not self-striping like this. This didn't bother me. They're going to go in shoes. But if it does bother you, know that. Another thing you might want to consider is, and most sock yarns will have this, is a blend with nylon in it. It's going to make your sock a little bit more sturdy and will last a little longer, because socks especially have places, especially on the heels and toes, that they get a lot of wear. And like they'll rub on your shoes, or they'll rub on the floor if you're walking around without shoes on, and they'll wear out faster. So a blend with nylon is a good idea, not required, but something to consider when you're looking for sock yarns. The cheaper, less expensive yarns you might want to look at. Kroy, K-R-O-Y sock yarn is a good one. Wool, or not wool, Lion Brand has a line called Sock Ease, E-A-S-E. Those are some of the less expensive ones. This particular yarn is from Beach Bum Yarn Co. on Etsy. A little more expensive. I think it was around $30 for a ball of yarn. So anywhere in between. So we have sock yarn, that's a 1. You're I'm going to put a chart here so you can kind of see. You're going to want a needle size probably of a 2. If you're using a sport weight, which is a category 3, it's a little bit thicker, you're probably going to want to look at a 4. I am using a worsted weight, and I'm going to be using a size 6 needle for this. Up or down, of course, we're going to look at a gauge swatch. So those are good starting points, but may not be where you end up, and that's totally fine. This is Cascade Yarns 220 Superwash, so it does not have nylon in it. I am making these for myself as kind of slipper house socks. I'm not super worried about that. But that is what I'm looking at. About 100 grams is what you're going to be looking for. Most yarns come in either 100 gram or 50 gram balls. So you'll need 2 of the 50 gram balls if you're making up to about a adult medium size sock. If you are larger than that, you'll need a little bit more yarn. And these are for calf length socks. This recipe will also allow you to make ankle socks if that's what you're into. So yeah, so like these are ankle socks. So that is, I think, all I need to share about yarn. So in addition to yarn, we will also be needing knitting needles with that are at least 24 inches. That's the size tip to tip. These I think are 32. So 24 to 32. You're not going to want shorter than that because we are going to need a nice long flexible cable. Much longer than that, you're going to have too long of a cable and it's going to be harder to manage. So these are from Knit Picks. It's their interchangeable line with a 24, I think, or 32. I don't know, either is fine, cable. And that's one brand I really like. I also like Knitter's Pride. They have one with very stretchy. They're not stretchy at all, actually. They're plastic. Very flexible is the word I'm looking for. Flexible cable, because we will be, how we end up doing it is your half of your stitches will be on these needles and half of your stitches will be on the other side, and it will kind of come in like this. And then these loops, that's magic loops. That's how we're going to end up there. So in addition to that, we will need 1 singular round stitch marker for when we're turning our heel. Some interlocking stitch markers. We're going to need at least 2 colors. If you have 2 colors, you're good. Probably about 10 of each will do you just fine. If you have more colors, that's fine. I just like to mark where I am changing, where I'm going to the next portion of the pattern with stitch markers. Tape measure, scissors, I don't have right here in front of me, but you also need scissors, and a tapestry needle. This is one that's kind of on the smaller side. You'll need it on the smaller side if you have sock yarn or sport weight yarn. When we are grafting toes at the end, we'll end up with about 8 to 10 stitches that we will have to sew together, and we'll need a needle for that. And if it's too thick, it can get kind of fiddly at the end. So, what else do I need to share? We're going to do a gauge swatch, and find our sock number. And I'll get a little bit more into that in the next video. And I'm really excited to have you along for this class. This is the 6th in a series of classes that I'm doing for people who are learning either to knit for the first time, or I've had some people join in like the 4th project because they already have some knitting knowledge. And each project introduces a couple of new skills. So for this project, we will be pick up and knit will be one of the new skills. Doing short rows will be a new skill, and that's how we make the little curve turn on the heel. And then finally is grafting or Kitchener stitch. That's same thing, grafting, Kitchener stitch, same thing. And that is for the end of the toes. And so that is what will be new this project. I'm really excited. I've been waiting to do socks for a long time because I love them. And I was really intimidated for a very long time, and because it seemed really complicated, but if you take it just one section at a time and one row at a time, it is really not that difficult. So, and the other thing is you get a lot of practice because you do it twice. I mean, most people have 2 feet, I guess, or you can just make one sock, I guess, if you want to. So looking forward to that. So see you next time for Gauge.